All right, thanks everybody for joining another edition of our Abacus Next webinars. Today we're going to be focusing on the Abacus Law program and specifically building search queries inside of our Abacus Law system, which is a very, very important feature for those of us who are trying to efficiently extract data, run reports, filter data, etc., etc. Before we jump into that, just a few housekeeping items. Everybody should start preparing June 24th through June 26th, our next Abacus Maximus Users Conference. Last year it was a big hit. We had a wonderful turnout and got some really, really great feedback from our clients. That's going to be at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, June 24th through June 26th. The welcome networking reception is huge. People love that. Cocktails, you get to kind of, meet some of your colleagues and industry professionals, and as well as talk to us, right? We also have 2 full days, the 25th and the 26th, of keynote speakers, breakout training sessions, informational sessions that are all good for CPE and CLE credits. And then we have a very popular catered dinner event that takes place on the evening of June 25th. So we hope to see everybody there. If you are looking for more information, please visit AbacusMaximus.com, and you can get all of your information, registration info, all of that good stuff there. So we will go ahead and jump into our weekly webinar. Again, that's on building search queries. And, if we break this down pretty elementary, just, out of the gate, what is a query? A query is a way for us to create defined filters that meet our needs with what we're trying to pull from the system. And when I say pull from the system, I mean, maybe I'm going into like a settlement conference and I want to have an Excel spreadsheet with all of my, matter settlement information on that. Well, I need to know how to create a query to do that, right? To extract that data. Maybe I want to run a query that only shows me open cases for a specific attorney, okay? Like a caseload report, so to speak. I got to know how to generate a query to do that, okay? So think of queries as filters for data extraction, whether you're extracting that data to your printer, to an Excel spreadsheet, or just visually on your monitor so that you can see it. Becoming an expert with queries will really make your life much easier in this system and, and just in the office kind of in general. So queries, there's 3 kinds really that the reference guides and the training videos break down. You've got what are known as regular queries. I call them static queries. You'll see why in a bit. We have quick queries, which are kind of like temporary filters. You set them once, and then when you're done with the data, they go away. You have also, the third, favorites. Okay, also known as my queries. And when I say my, I mean yours, right? And these are queries that you may be constantly using over and over. And because of that, you are saving those queries for quick access is essentially what you're doing, okay? So give me just 1 second here, and I'm going to pull up different areas that we can start our queries from. Remember, I said it's reports, it's for filtering visual data on your screen. So there's a couple different areas in the program where you can access the query manager or the query menu. If you are doing reports, okay, these can be printable reports or, reports you want to email to somebody, you can go to File, Reports, and then once you're in that report menu, you just need to choose, what type of report you're wanting to run. And really the 3 big reports that most people run have to do with names, events, or matters, okay? Or maybe some kind of combination of both. So if I was doing a matters report, I can get to my query section right here from this matter report control window. Okay, notice that little button there that says query. And when I click that drop down, I have those options, right? There's my quick query option. There's my query manager option, AKA the regular static query, okay? So that's one way to get into your queries. Now, once you're in either one of these menus, okay, whether it's quick query, okay, or query manager, once you're in either one of these sections, it doesn't matter how you got there. These windows are the same. Okay, so I'll show you that. That was from the report trail there. If I was doing this from maybe the Matters browse window, okay, notice I have my query button, just like on my events browse window, I have a query button, and on my names browse window, I have a query button. So I have those same options right there in my query dropdown menu. So if I was doing some sort of matter filtering or something like that, I'm going to go into my query dropdown and decide, what type of query I'm wanting to run. We'll start with quick because those are pretty easy. Quick query, like I was saying in the beginning, is a way to temporarily set a filter so that you can, see specific data that meets that criteria visually in front of you. So like right now, if I wanted to see every case that is assigned to the attorney initials SJ, okay, we can see right there, SJ. I can go in here and set a quick query. Okay, I just hit my little arrow, I go into my quick query menu, and I have a generic matter screen where I can set my attorney value. Okay, I click my arrow, I choose that attorney from my list. Now I'm setting that filter inside of that field, and I'm clicking done. Okay, it's going to ask me if there were any other queries set previously to this. It's going to ask me if I just want to run this new query that I have set, or if I want to combine the current query that's set, which in this case happens to be the open cases query, with whatever my new one is. So I'm just going to do my new query only. And there we go. See how the rest of those matters disappeared from my view, and I'm only now seeing the one matter that is assigned to the attorney SJ. All right. So this is something that a lot of attorneys in the office really like, because, if they're not involved in other cases, they just kind of, they don't even want to have to scroll through it. Okay. Or when they're running searches for, their data, they don't want to get hits on other people's cases, right, that have nothing to do with them. So if you're setting queries like that, then whatever you search for up here in your search bar is only going to scan the matters that qualify with that query, right? But remember, it's temporary, okay? Notice it says temp right after those initials, okay? So when I close this and I reopen it, I'm right back to where I started, okay? It does not save a quick query because that's not its purpose. Its purpose is just to quickly, filter, data that's not important, to filter that out, all right? So when you're doing a quick query, if you noticed there, when I did it from my browse windows, and this goes for any of the other browse windows, names, events, matters, doesn't matter. When you go into quick query, you are presented with a generic matter screen. Okay, very limited on what items you can enter into these fields. If I want to do a certain attorney's code with a certain type of case, well, I can use these two fields, right? I just say attorney, let's say attorney SH, and case code is, we'll say personal injury. Okay, specifically personal injury vehicle accident. Okay, so now both of these items need to be true. The matter has to be assigned to attorney SH, and the matter case code must be PI vehicle. So when I click done, it's going to again ask me how I want to work this query. I'm just going to say new query only. And there we go. We have two matters that meet that criteria. Notice they both are assigned to SH, and they both have a case code of PI vehicle. So what happens when we want to set our quick query based off of more detailed information? So let's do a comparison real quick. When we are doing this from the Matters browse window, we get the generic quick query screen. Okay, we're limited on fields. What if I want to do this filter based off of some more detailed information specific to a personal injury case? So if I open up this matter here, Alexis v. Scott, Okay, you can see on this screen, I have got tons of different fields that I could potentially query off of, right? So let's say I only wanted to query matters by a certain accident date. Okay, well, accident date is not a field on that generic filter screen. So in order to do that, you need to physically open that type of matter, okay? Notice on the left side, there's a little arrow button where my mouse is. If you click that, that opens up your matters browse window, and you can adjust this size-wise if you want to make it a little smaller, okay? That opens up your matters browse window there on the side. And notice in the bottom of that detailed matter screen, there is another query button. If you click that query button, you get the same options. And look what happens now when I select Quick Query. I'm presented with a detailed screen where I can enter in more detailed filter options. Okay, so let's look at that again. Okay, I'm going to do it with a different type of matter. We'll close out of this PI matter, and we'll do, let's say, a divorce. Okay, I'm going to open up this divorce case here, and now maybe I want to filter my divorce cases by, oh, I don't know, date married or something like that. Once I have a divorce case opened, now I go into my query button, I choose Quick Query, and I'm presented with a blank divorce-styled filter window, okay, where I can now enter in more case code specific type filters. All right, so the lesson there is if you are just doing a very simple generic quick query like, you know, attorney code or date opened or case code, you can go right into the browse window and just do it from the quick query there, okay, because the generic screen will work. But if you're looking for something specific to a type of case like immigration, okay, make sure you open up that type of case, then go into your query button in the bottom and choose Quick Query, because then you'll get that same style of query filter screen. All right. So that's quick queries. Pretty easy. They get used a lot, but don't forget, they're temporary. The second type of query that people use quite often, specifically our administrators and our power users, are regular queries, also known as static queries, and we find those in the query manager. So if we are in our browse window and we go into query manager, you're going to get a whole list of different queries that have either been have either come with your program, you know, maybe dependent upon the practice packs that you have. They could also be queries that people have created in the past, but you'll have a whole list of different static queries here that you can choose from. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory. Like if you look at this one at the top that says open, right? The description only shows open matters, right? So that's a pretty obvious query. We kind of know what that does. So if I were to click edit on that query to see the behind the scenes, we can see here the field that we're querying is the closed date field. And the way we are querying that field is we want it to be empty, right? Because if a matter is open, then it doesn't have a close date, right? So that is how we determine whether or not a matter is open. So, you know, kind of think about that logic here on what we're trying to do. But before we dive into the expressions, let's define some of the things that we see here on this query manager window. First column is the query ID. This is just a shorthand code for the query itself, okay? You can search by the code up here in the Find ID field. It's always important when you are adding your own custom queries, give a good description, okay? You're not the only person, most likely, who's going to be using these, so be descriptive with your queries. Don't rely on the query ID as being the identifiable characteristic of what this query does. put a good description in there for your colleagues, all right? So if we look at, this one here, open TRU, okay? That could mean, if I didn't have a good description in here, I don't know, maybe it's a big firm and maybe I've got somebody in the office who has the initials TRU. If I didn't have this description, I may think that is a query that whoever TRU is, they just created for themselves. But since I have this description, I know that I'm only going to show open trust matters, right? So it's very important to have a good description. The count is basically a count of any matter for this particular example. It could also be names or events if we were in those windows, but it's a count of any matter that met that query criteria. Now, the last time you ran the count, so the last time I ran this count, there was 12 open matters, okay? Some of these say 0. That doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't cases that meet those criteria, but it means that potentially a count was never ran after the query was set, okay? So if I do only open matters here, I can do count again. Notice my button in the bottom left corner that says count. If I click that, I'm going to go ahead and run my count on my highlighted query. It's all done. And there we go. See how my count changed? 23. I have 23 open matters. So this is, I actually like this because if you're creating queries or if you're new to query creation, sometimes you're gonna mess up on the expression that you create. It's just a fact of life, especially if it's a more advanced query where you have a lot of different expressions in it. So if just as an example, if you know that you have, 50 active divorce cases, right? Open divorce cases, and you run a count on that query and it comes back as 0 or it comes back as, 1,000, that's a key indicator that something is wrong with your query expression, and you may want to go and check it and modify that to correct that. Then run a count again, see if that number looks more realistic. Now, that's the count button in the bottom left. Okay, you can also print these queries out. Okay, some people are just, they like having that piece of paper in their hand. So if you want to print these to like a PDF and actually view what the expressions are, okay, I know that's a little bit hard to read just because of the column types, but you can kind of see what the expression logic is in that query expression column. The easiest way to view that is really just to highlight it and click the edit button to view what the logic is, what the expression is behind the scenes. Now, if you are going to be editing a query that already exists in your program, okay, in other words, you're opening this up and you want to modify this open query, don't highlight it and click edit and make changes. What you want to do is actually clone it, okay? Clone this query, give it a new name. I'll just call it Open Scott. How about that, or close enough? Okay. Now edit the clone. All right. The reason we're doing this is because if I edit the original that came with my program, the next time I have an update to my software, it's going to override my changes. Okay. So that's very important. Make sure you are cloning your queries if they are original queries. Now, if it's a custom one that you created from scratch, and you gave it its own defined query ID, you don't need to worry about cloning it because the system won't override that. It doesn't even recognize it during the update. So don't worry about that. That rule only applies to your, to your queries that came with your system that you're wanting to maybe make a few tweaks to. Now, I have one created here specifically for a webinar. I just called it webinar. So we'll go ahead and pull that up. And because this is one that I created on my own, okay, this did not come with my program, I can just highlight it and I can click edit, okay, and that's no harm, no foul. Query ID, we talked about that. That's where you enter that in, okay? Just type in what you want that query ID to be. Give it a good description. Remember, you're not the only one that's going to use these. Okay, be descriptive. And then here in this particular example query, we have 2 lines of logic. All right. Look at these columns across the top. We have a column that says field. That is the field that the system is going to look at. We have comparison. Comparison is how the system is going to judge that field. And if we want to see a specific value inside of that field, then we're going to put that in the value column. Parentheses, we will talk about those in just a sec. And then you have an and or column. Okay, and ors are connectors. We use these whenever we have more than one line inside of our expression. You always have to have an and or an or. Okay, you have to have either one of those because the system needs to know how the second, third, or fourth, line is going to interact with the previous line. Okay, how it's going to be connected. So if we look at this first line of code, we've got the field is opened. So basically we're telling the program, go look at the opened date field on our matter screen. And if that field is greater than or equal to the date of 1/1/2018, then we want to see it. Okay, we want to see that matter on our report. Now, because we have an and connector here, we've got another thing that also has to be true. So after this first line is done, after the system reads that across the matters database, it's going to come right down to the second line, and it's going to say, and does the attorney field, is it exactly equal to SH? So if both of these things are true, both of these lines, if they are true, then that matter is going to show on our matter report. All right. Now, if we look at this, or if we want to add a new line, I can click this add button here in the top left, and it's going to ask me how I want to combine my next expression with the previous. So again, notice my and ors. Okay. So if I was going to say, maybe an and, I can click that. Okay. And then it brings up my expression editor. This is where I fill in the details that are going to show inside of our query builder window. All right. So I could say field and then, choose a different one, maybe close date or accident date, whatever it may be. And I add that into my list. So we'll do this actually from scratch. I'm going to delete these lines out and I will show you how I did these. Okay. Actually, we'll leave that first one there since it has to be there. Okay. So all I did for this first one was I went into my field, my expression editor rather. I clicked my little field button. Okay. I chose the proper field from my list, right? The opened field. I went into my comparison dropdown. I chose greater than or equal to. And then I put in a value of 1/1/2018. I just typed that in right there. Okay. When you are doing a greater than or equal to on a field, it is important that the value that you're entering in is exactly the way it would show on the matter screen or name screen or event screen, whichever way you're doing it. Okay. If I were to put in, just 1/1/2018, the system would not return the proper result. Okay. It needs to show the same way it would on the matter screen. So it's 01/01/2018. Then I click done. Now I want to add my second expression. So I click add. Now I'm going to put in, and notice my connector was already there, the and connector. Okay. Now I put in my new field for attorney. So I'm going to click that field drop-down menu. I'm going to run a search here for the attorney field. There it is. Click done. And my comparison is going to be is exactly equal to, right there, second one down. And then I'm going to put in my value of SH. That is my attorney code. Click done. And there's our second line. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Okay. And so that's, that's kind of the gist of the expression editor from, the basics. Now, if this is a query that attorneys are going to want to run over and over, throughout the year, then maybe we don't want to have a static date inside of our value, okay? Because if we do that, then basically this query has to be edited every time we want to run it anew, right? So if I want to run it for January, of, maybe the year of 2019, then I would want this to be 1/1/2019. So instead of having to come back in here and edit that line every time I want to run it, what you can actually do is something really cool here, is you can edit this one time, and instead of making the comparison greater than or equal to a specific value, rather than that, just blank out this value field and make the comparison prompt me for value, okay? When you do a prompt me for value, it is actually going to start, I'm going to put 01/01/2019 as the default, but this will actually prompt the user when they run the query to type in what value they want, okay? So as a matter of fact, I'll make this 2018 so you can see it in action. So we'll go ahead and click done here. Okay, I'm going to click done again. So now when I click done and I run this query, I'm going to just choose my highlighted query. Notice how it's the very first thing it asked me to do is enter a value to compare. Okay, so I would come in here and I would actually type 01/01/2019, click done, and then it's going to ask me which record I want to go to. So first, last, whatever. And then it's going to show me, whichever one. Now I don't have any that open for that, so that's why it returned nothing. Okay, so that's why it's good to do your counts, right? But that prompt is very cool. Okay, let's look at that one more time. Let's highlight our query. Let's click edit. Here's our expression. Okay, if I click edit on that, I get to change my comparison value to prompt me for value. And then, they can enter it in as they go. So for like office administrators who are constantly being asked for, the same report, but for different attorneys, like, Attorney Sally wants to see all of her January cases that are assigned to her. Attorney John wants to see all of his January cases assigned to him. What you can do is use these prompt me for value comparisons on each of these lines. And now you just have to enter that in whenever, you run the query, okay? And that will, you just enter in Sally's initials, you enter in Johnny's initials each time you run it. So that's a pretty neat little query. I definitely recommend, utilizing that in your office. Let me clear out, the value you're not going to want there, okay? So use that prompt me for value. Now, we're going to stay on topic here with this query manager since that's the most involved portion, but we're actually going to kick over to a different database. Events, that is definitely and notice what I'm doing here. I'm clearing this current query so that it takes me back to my normal matters list. But events, that is something that we're definitely running calendar reports for, right? We want to see a list of all upcoming hearings. We want to see a list of all upcoming depositions, upcoming client appointments. Well, we can do that right here inside of our events browse window. And the events browse window, if you look at this window, it's pretty self-explanatory. We have our chronological order of date. That would be, the appointment date. We have who it's assigned to, the time it takes place, what it is, and then whatever is written, inside of the note for that particular event. But as usual, up in the top right corner, we have our query drop-down menu, and we can choose our query manager. And inside of our query manager, just run a search for the query that you're looking for. And once you find it, go ahead and click done, and that will run the query, okay? If you need to edit it or create your own, you're going to utilize your buttons along the right side. If you're starting from scratch, click add and add your new query from scratch. If you are wanting to edit an existing query, okay, that came with the program, clone it, then edit the clone. If you are editing one that you created from scratch in the past, just highlight it and click edit. Now, inside of this query, we've got a few different expressions here. Also notice we're utilizing different connectors. Okay, we're utilizing both connectors and or. We're also utilizing parentheses. Okay. If you've ever used any other type of expression builder in any other program, you may be familiar with parentheses. But where this comes from is based on the fact that ands always take priority over ors. Okay? So in other words, if I didn't have parentheses in here and I started this query the way it is with an or as the first connector, the system does not read from top down. It doesn't matter the order. What matters is ands always get done before ors. So if I didn't have these parentheses, it would actually run this second line and this third line, then run the first line. Okay, and we don't want that, right? So people make that mistake sometimes when they're building queries. They want to look at this in order of the number that's on the left, 1, 2, 3, and no matter, whatever that order is, that's the order that the system is going to run the query. That is not true, okay? Ands will always take precedence over ors unless the ors are nested in parentheses. Okay, that is why here I have a parenthesis starting on my first line and ending at the end of my second line. So basically what I'm saying in this particular query is I want the system to go look at my events, and if the event is assigned to either SH or JD and it is taking place in LA Superior Court, then I want to see that event. All right? So I've got the or is being done on its own within the parentheses, then my and is being kind of injected into that logic, it's kind of like a final step, right? So if I look at this here and I just click done, and I go ahead and highlight that and click done again, it should show me, there we go. So 2 events in my events database meet that query. They're either assigned to SH or JD, and if we open these up, you will see the where LA Superior Court, okay, for both of them, all right? So back in that query manager, let's just look at that one more time. I can't stress this enough, okay? Parentheses should always be used when you are leading off with an or any time, an or is coming before an and in most cases, all right? So, and like I said, you'll use that a lot, in your event queries and stuff like that. So become familiar with those different columns and those different features. Now, you're going to notice when you're running queries, and this is kind of getting towards the end of our session today. So I want to leave you with this one last pro tip. Okay. You're going to notice when you're running queries, especially if it's a query, if it's a larger query, a larger expression that you have not ran before, you may notice that the length of time that it takes to get your results back is greater. Okay, it takes longer, right? This has to do with indexing. Okay, for anybody out there who knows or doesn't know what indexing is, I will explain it. Indexing is basically a computer's way or an application's way, like Abacus, to always have popular data easily accessible to the application. So things like first name, last name, open date, close date, things like that. Who, when, where. These are very popular fields that could potentially be indexed by the system so that when you run a simple query like this, you get your results immediately, okay? If you have a more detailed query expression that you are finding is taking a long time to run, and this happens, we've got clients out there with thousands and thousands and thousands of cases, okay, and events and contacts. So, the more data, the slower you get your results. That's just a fact of life, okay? So here's a pro tip. To speed that up, take the fields that are in that elaborate expression that you're running that's taking a long time and make them into indexes, okay? The way you do that is under the File menu, and I believe this is an administrator function, just so you know. So if you get into the File Setup menu and the User Indexes option is grayed out, that is probably because of your security permissions in the program. So you need to contact your administrator, see if they can change that for you, or see if they can set up the indexes for you. But you're going to go to File Setup, User Indexes. That is going to open up a current list of key indexes. So I already have some in mind. But if you look here, date of birth, right? I have that listed as an indexed field. So when I run a query on date of birth, I get my results back in the snap of a finger. Very quick, very quick. A second or two, I'll have them back, okay? Add new indexes for, obscure fields that you're querying off of, like, final settlement amount or, date of response or something like that. Things that the system wouldn't automatically index out of the box. So click Add, okay? Tell the system what database the field lives in. That is key, okay? So, names, events, matters, those are the three most popular, okay? Choose the right database. Give the index a name. This is an identifiable name for you, okay? Notice in my DOB, my index name is understandable. I pretty much know what that is, and anybody else who goes in here will know as well. So, don't get too wacky there. Be descriptive, okay? And then give it an index key. The index key is just the field. That's all, okay? So if I wanted to do, like, let's say the class of my client, right? I would call this index name class, okay? And then my index key would be class, all right? Now I click, well, it's going to ask me if I want to add any more fields. I can say yes or no. I'm just going to say no, okay? Now I click done, okay? And, and this one actually already exists, so we don't need to worry about that. But, you get the idea. So you can add, the field, give it an index name, choose from the list of available fields, click done, and then that will save that index. And now, as you start to run that more and more, it's going to get faster and faster, okay? Until eventually, it's just like immediately popping up on your screen with your results, okay? So key takeaways from today's webinar. There's a lot of different ways you can get into the Query Manager or into Quick Query. You can do it from reports, right? We can do it from our browse windows if we're just trying to filter our data here. Okay, we've got our Quick Query Manager there. One thing I did not note, when you're in the Query Manager, you can set any query that you create. You can set that as the default query for that person. Okay, so that way, anytime you open your Matters browse window, it automatically launches that query for you. You cannot do that with quick queries. Okay, it does not work. Remember, they're temporary. And then down here, you see where it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is basically just kind of like a breadcrumb trail of queries that I've used recently. So I'll have that list there, okay, that I can go back and just quickly click on if I need to. So a few different ways you can get there, all right? If we want to make our search results faster, create an index on those fields. File, Setup, User Indexes. Create that index, okay? And then always remember, if you are doing ands and ors in your expression editor, make sure you are using your parentheses correctly, okay? Ors means either one or the other thing can be true. Doesn't have to be both, right? And both things have to be true. Always remember that. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I hope you found it useful. Again, if you're ever in need of additional training, please feel free to email training@abacusnext.com. We can point you in the right direction. You can also access our training on our website. Give me just one sec. I will pull up that URL for you as well. You can actually schedule it directly from our main resources page. This is very, very cool. If you go to our main webpage here, abacusnext.com, click on the resources link. Go under professional services. There is a link for schedule, training, and upgrades. Select that. Choose once you get past the original or the main screen here, click next, and then choose the program that you're utilizing. Okay, and then once you do that, just choose what you're looking for: Abacus training, onboarding training, different things like that. And this actually links with all of our trainers' calendars, so you will interact directly with that trainer to get scheduled. And you get to pick the time and day, assuming that there's availability on that time and day. Also, underneath all the rest of these links up here, it's always great to take a look at the different solutions. Abacus is a constantly growing and evolving company, so we have quite a few different office solutions for people. And don't forget about the Abacus private cloud. The cloud is one of the biggest things you can do now in business, taking that data and that technology and moving it off of your premises where it's a huge liability and putting it into a secure private cloud. That is the big thing now that people are doing, just to be more secure. Access from anywhere that you have an internet connection, mobile access, iPad access, things like that. So if you are interested in the Abacus private cloud, definitely go to that link, fill in just some small information here, and we will send you some info on how that works. Thank you again, everybody, for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you on the next webinar.